Hi everyone and welcome to our latest conversation with webinar. The webinar today will last about 45 minutes in length. The first part will be a discussion with Clothier, who we have with us today, followed by Q&A. So the Q&A piece, I'll go through the bit of housekeeping now to explain that to you all. Hopefully most of you now are familiar with Teams, but for those who aren't, there's a Q&A icon on the screen which you can click on to ask any questions that you may have. Those questions will be monitored by our head of food and drink, Fleur Lewis, who will jump in at the end to ask those questions. You can ask those questions anonymously if you want by ticking the box which makes you anonymous. Equally, if you're signed in as a guest, it gives you the opportunity to add your name if you want to be recognised on that question. So let's get started. By way of introduction to me, my name's Ria Burridge, and I'm an audit partner working in the Bristol office, predominantly working with food and drink businesses. I'm working from home today in my little office, although part of our team has actually started to go back to work. We're split into blue teams and red teams, and I'm a blue team, which is a home week today, so I'm working from home. We have had a few internet problems this morning, so I do have Fleur as backup to jump in if necessary, so the whole thing doesn't fall over, but hopefully that won't occur. So as I say, I'm here today with Clothier, who is MD of Wyke Farms. As most of you will probably already know, Wyke Farms is a family-run business based in the heart of Somerset, a cheddar cheese making region, and it's also really famous, or I think it's quite famous for the significant investment it's made in terms of energy production and being 100% green. Doing all of that stuff while actually making sure that the traditional art of making cheese isn't lost in any of it. So having that green angle, but also making sure that you're making it in the right way. Under Rich's leadership, the business has grown quite significantly in the UK, but also the cheese is now available in 160 countries worldwide. So a lot of going on there, and hopefully we'll get to explore some of those subjects during our conversation today. So welcome, Rich. It's really great to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honour to be here. Thank you.
Great. So I thought I'd just start off by just talking a little bit about your business currently. Obviously, COVID is a big factor for a lot of businesses at the moment. Where are you working today? So obviously I've said I'm working from home. Are you also at home?
Yeah, I'm working from home as much as possible. I can go into work, and we're trying to keep all of the production areas running and social distance as much as possible. So anyone who can work from home or work, most of the offline people are able to work from home. So we've probably got about 25% of the workforce working from home at the moment, and it's actually been working quite effectively. So I've been quite pleased with how that's gone, to be fair.
And I've been reading a little bit about cheese during COVID, and read recently that it was a key commodity in the same way as loo roll during lockdown, in terms of people rushing out to get their cheddar. How have you found business during that time? Has it been busy for you?
Yeah, it's been really busy because obviously the food service side dropped off, so the pubs and clubs and restaurants, but the retail volumes went up by about 30%. So we've had the busiest March that we've ever had. There was a slight change in mix, as I said. So on the export side, the retail export business was quite busy, and the UK retail was busy, but we lost some of the premium eating out opportunities, so some of the premium hotel business. So although we were really busy, it was a lot of the less mature and less premium cheeses. So people were eating loads and loads of cheese at home because it's a great convenience food, and obviously eating out less and eating less of the premium stuff. So it was a mixed bag, really.
And how did it work? So you continued production during that time. Did you have to put any special measures in place?
Yeah, we continued production, and the most challenging area was the packing plant, where we have about 140 people on one site, although they are split over 3 shifts. We've recently invested in quite a lot of automatic robot pallet systems and wraparound carton systems, which has taken out a lot of the close working where people used to put cheese in boxes by hand. That's now done by robots. So that investment actually stood us in really good stead during this during the lockdown period, and enabled us to enforce some sensible social distancing measures. And we were able to get some test kits quite early on through one of the private medical companies, so that we could really get onto the testing early, so that if anyone had any sort of symptoms, we could keep them away from work, test them, and then get them back again.
Great. It's been a difficult time for everyone, isn't it, in terms of having to adjust in terms of their workforce, and obviously workforce is at the heart of everyone's business, and I'm sure it is the same for you in terms of you want to do what's best for your staff.
Yeah, for me, the most important thing was ensuring that, you know, we can keep everyone safe, keep all the team safe, and get all of the team to the other side without incurring any serious illness or anything like that. So the biggest priority for me is keeping my colleagues and friends all safe and sound. So
yeah, absolutely. So COVID has taken over quite a lot of the headlines recently, but the one thing which is looming on the horizon, which is a really key issue, which I'm sure for you especially, is Brexit. In terms of Brexit is still firmly on the agenda, and we're hurtling towards the end of December quite fast now, but still there appears to be any decent trade deals in place, especially within Europe. What are your thoughts on Brexit at the moment, currently as we stand? I know you've been quite vocal on this in the past. I just wondered what your current views were. Yeah,
I mean, I campaigned for Remain, and I still believe that it's a high-risk operation, the whole Brexit thing. We're starting to see some of the complications now as the deadline's approaching, and the types of challenges we have as a business. We should be packing product now ready for January the 1st, but we don't know what the labelling requirements are going to be. We don't know how the administration is going to work. We don't know how the logistics is going to work. So we're trying to second guess what's going to happen. So, you know, we're looking at things like setting up a European entity, i.e. Wyke Farms EU, that we can use to import into the EU with, but we're second guessing, and unfortunately it's one of those situations where no one really knows what we should do. So everyone says be prepared for Brexit, and we're like, well, tell me what we've got to do, and we'll do it. But so we're trying to prepare for a no deal and hope that that'll be enough and we can come back from there, hopefully.
Yeah. And what do you think in terms of, does Brexit bring any opportunities for you? So obviously the whole Euro piece has got its difficulties, but does it open up any further opportunities for the rest of the world?
Yeah, I mean, whilst I campaign for Remain, I am sympathetic about the argument that the major growth areas in the world are outside of Europe. You know, as a food producer and a business that integrates farming as well, you know, our job primarily is to feed people. There's currently about 7 billion people in the world. Within the blink of an eye, that's going to go up to 9 billion-ish. Those extra 2 billion people, they're not going to be in the EU, they're not going to be in the UK. So we do have to look outside the EU for trade deals. If you look specifically at regions like India, you know, they're expecting to see 600 million people join the middle classes in the next 10 years. So, you know, I'd be crazy if I wasn't excited about the opportunities of selling to, you know, more Indians and more Chinese and, you know, all those people from the Asian region, but also, you know, potentially getting a trade deal with the US or whatever. But and I am, you know, I'd really, and for me, Brexit will be judged more about, you know, we have to look at what we have now, and we have to judge it by what we gain. If we end up losing some European business and gaining a bit elsewhere, that's not a success for me. It has to be incremental extra trade for UK manufacturing generally, and that's going to take some really high levels of skill to balance those trade deals from those other regions.
Yeah. And what challenges have you had then in terms of, you talk about some of those more emerging markets, so India? Is there challenges? I expect there are challenges in terms of setting up in those countries, and have you progressed quite a long way down the line in terms of doing that?
I think one of the things that I've learned with export is you need to be there early, because it takes a long time to develop. If you take India as a case in point, you know, hugely exciting, one of the biggest dairy industries in the world. They consume a lot of dairy products, so we'd like to be out there. At the moment, they're at the start of the curve, so and the levies of trading in India are really punitive at the moment. And I think what people need to understand is that you're not going to rock into one of the biggest economy, the fastest growing economy in the world, and say, right, let's have a free trade deal. You're going to obey all the rules that the UK puts in place. You know, we're talking about a country that's just put together its own space program. You know, they're not going to be told what to do by anyone. And one of the things that I also find as an oversimplification is that all the countries that I've been to and we trade with, they all want to see integration of people. They all want to see, as part of a trade deal, more of their students coming to UK universities so that they're integrated with UK culture, and then they go home and they can take advantage of those learnings. Now, how, you know, I think, you know, we all need to be realistic about trade deals going forward, and how that dovetails into things like immigration targets, because you want people to be coming over to go to university and learning about the culture. I mean, only, you know, a year or so ago, I had a fantastic customer that we'd met at a trade show who came to Bruton, could speak really good English, from South America. He was from Brazil. And he'd set up his own pizza business, and he was using loads of mozzarella from Italy and he was looking for cheddar from the UK with provenance and everything else. And when I got chatting to the guy, he'd been to university somewhere like Bournemouth, you know, he'd come over, and 10 years later, he's coming back looking to trade with us. And that's how important the universities are in providing a backbone that we can build trade on, and that's why, you know, engagement with those universities is fundamental to building trade deals, I think.
And as a business, are you engaging with those universities? Do you take in people placements and things?
We do. We've got increasing numbers of apprenticeship schemes and things like that. But I think the role that universities can play is bridge building all around the world, and it's one of the great parts of our educational economy, is the fact that our universities are respected throughout the world, and it's one of the areas where I think that we can build bridges into these really fast growing economies like China, Brazil and India and places like that, because we're recognised as a country that does things properly, and that certainly helps when you come to sell products out into those regions.
Yeah. And do you think, well, I think probably COVID is going to have an impact on that in terms of the number of international students who actually come into university this year? I don't know, you hear mixed things in the press, don't you, in respect of how many students are actually now coming over to the UK to study. But I'm guessing it probably will have an overall short-term impact on that happening.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the key things about Brexit is that when we leave the negotiating table with Europe, we need to leave, hopefully, with a really good, hopefully both sides, you know, relatively happy, but leave them with the impression that they're really important to us. We want to carry on trading with them, and that the UK is open for business for everyone around the world. We're not saying we're shutting the doors, and, you know, we have to, somehow the government needs to adopt an export mindset, which includes finding ways to build bridges with countries and cultures all around the world.
Yeah. I also read, I was reading in the press about Japan and the Japan deal agreement and the Stilton stumbling point of things. Do you know much? Do you have any thoughts on that, or?
No, to be honest, I don't know much about the Stilton market, to be fair. But the Japanese market is quite exciting. At the moment, they don't eat much, cheddar type cheese, but I think they're increasing their consumption of dairy the same as China. I tend to think that China and Japan are maybe more, at the moment, more exciting for meat type producers and maybe fish producers. And I know friends who work in the meat sector are doing really well in China. The dairy producing regions like India and the US probably, and Canada are probably more interesting from my point of view, to be fair, for cheese and dairy products.
Yeah. And in terms of obviously that breaking into those other international markets, what sort of challenges does that bring? Sort of in things like the currency impact and things like changing the supply chain, things like that. Do you see those impacts on those things on the horizon in terms of being big impacts for you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges with exports is it is a big world. We're trading directly and indirectly in about 160 countries now, and it's very easy to say, I want to sell everywhere. And the biggest challenge for us is prioritising the regions that are going to deliver the biggest growth. And we've tried loads of metrics to try and identify that, and one of them we developed them ourselves. One of them we call the Chablis Index, which is where we basically look at any country that consumes good quality French wines and is showing growth in those areas, because obviously there's great wine being produced all around the world, just like there's great cheese, but the areas that are buying and paying for that wine provenance, we think are good areas to support in terms of their ability to buy into cheese provenance. So you can come up with all these sort of metrics to try and target the right areas, but quite often it comes down to gut feel. And you mentioned currency, and currency stability is one of those things that comes under that ease of doing business. There's some fantastic opportunities in Africa, for example, different parts of Africa. But if you look at some of the countries in North Africa, the ease of doing business is much tougher than, say, somewhere like South Africa, which you can deal directly with supermarkets who have the same supply arrangements as the European supermarkets, and supermarkets in places like Australia. And that's the challenge in the emerging markets, is you don't have that retail consolidation. So, in the UK, we have 5 or 6 big retailers, similar in a lot of the countries in Europe. When you get into some of these developing countries, they tend to be very regional. So you're dealing with lots of different regions, lots of different supermarkets in different regions. So there's loads of opportunities out there. It's just, a business the size of Wyke, and I believe even really big exporting businesses still can't afford to be absolutely everywhere. So you need to pick your regions and give it a go. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to why, for whatever reason, people buy or want to buy lots of cheese in X region. So
as a business, do you have a team on the ground sort of doing all that research behind the scenes, working out where to go next?
Yeah, we do. We've tried to do it. We try and do it in-house. We've also worked with a business called Promar International, who have a lot of experience in fruits in different regions. So we've done a bit of work with those guys, and we've also done a bit of work on, from our own experiences as well, and also looking at where the global retailers are. So if you look at retailers like Walmart and Costco, usually where those businesses are putting down roots, there's opportunities to sell. So businesses like Carrefour, Walmart, Costco, you know, Publix and people like that. They're in the regions usually, or going into the regions where it's, you know, where it's worth looking at. So and it's just and then really exports then is selling cheese is the same wherever you go. You have to, you know, basically get your samples out, get people to try it, and if they like it, they're going to buy it. And that's so that approach works everywhere. The challenging bit is how do you get it to their store or their door, you know, in those regions. But I'm amazed over the last 10 years how much the world shrunk in terms of trade. You know, the supply links are there everywhere now, and so there are some fantastic opportunities post-Brexit. Whether or not post-Brexit the UK will get a trade deal with India or the US faster than the EU will, I don't know. And you know, I think that it's going to be tough to get a trade deal with the US. You know, Donald Trump's made it pretty clear about who is in charge, and you know, and who's going to have the upper hand. So I think wherever you do trade deals, whether you're part of Europe or whether you want a trade deal with the US or a trade deal with India, it's a two-way relationship at the end of the day. Everything is, and to think that we're going to get everything our own way with everyone we deal with is just being unrealistic.
And how do you manage supply to those countries, which are obviously much further away than Europe? Is that easy for you in terms of, have you got a good supply chain in terms of getting it out there, or does that cause more problems for your business?
The great thing about cheddar cheese is that it, you know, if it's made properly, it gets better with age. So some of it can mature on the water. So even if it takes 3 months to get out to Australia or somewhere like that, it's maturing on the water. We've got long shelf lives that we can work with, unlike a fresh product, which makes it a really exciting product from an export point of view. So in terms of the dairy sector, it's probably, I would view it as one of the most exportable products. So yeah, so that's really good.
Good. So I'm sure everybody on the call today is quite keen to understand about all your sustainability and 100% green energy pledge, which is sort of going on within Wyke Farms. So it's 100% green energy, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to understand what that means and what steps you've had to take to get there.
Yeah, so we started out with the renewables about 10 years ago. You know, we were focusing on lean manufacture and how we could make the business as efficient as possible. And when we were looking at our lean manufacture model, we realized that all the work we did on cutting energy usage, cutting water usage, making production runs more efficient, everything we did to try and be more efficient and cut cost was impacting in a positive way on the environment. So we were shrinking our plastic packaging, for example, and all that sort of stuff, reducing waste, and it was lowering costs, but it was having a positive benefit on the environment as well. So we said, well, hold on, if you turn that around and you say, we want to be a low carbon business that does everything possible to benefit the environment and create a net positive impact, what savings could that then yield for the business? And we found that by adopting a 100% green mantra, which means in everything we do, we try and do it in the most environmentally responsible way possible, that then unlocked savings and cost savings as well that we would never have thought of or arrived at thinking about lean manufacture on its own. So we really bought into the mantra that a low carbon business is a low cost business, and we started to generate all of our own power. So we started off with solar panels, and then we looked at all the waste streams that we had coming off of our farms, our dairy and the local farms in the region, and and we were just assessing really what natural assets we had for green. So we looked at things like mini hydroelectric in the local river, we looked at potential wind turbines, and we came to the conclusion that where green projects work best is when they utilise natural assets and you're not fighting against things. So we put our first AD plants in to start with, the first phase, which basically took our own waste and a bit of waste from some of the local farms. So the lactose from the milk that we don't use. So basically we take everything out of the milk, so we make cheese, which is most of the solids. We're then left with the whey. We then take the proteins out of the whey, which go for sports drinks, etc. And then we're left with the lactose simple sugar, which isn't really any use for anything else. So that goes into the AD plant with all the farm waste and the other waste streams, and that produces gas, which initially we used just to run generators which produce all the electricity, but we also harvest the heat off of those engines as well to heat the cheese process. And then as part of the second phase, we put in more anaerobic digesters, which then produce more gas, which we then put through membranes and clean the gas up and then inject an odorant into it, and then we inject that gas back into the grid. So we're injecting about 20,000 cubic meters a day of green gas back into the grid that goes into Bruton and the surrounding areas. So Bruton's probably the most, it's probably the greenest town in the whole of the UK because it runs almost exclusively on green gas that we produce at Wyke. So that's quite a nice thing. So we run all on green gas and electricity, and we're looking at solutions for recyclable films and wherever possible and those sorts of things. So we're just looking at the business in a holistic way, and the aim is to produce cheese in a way that has a net positive impact. And for that, for me, that means that the community, the environment, and everything else is better for having Wyke there than it would be if we weren't there. And that's what we strive to achieve wherever possible.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic thing for you to be able to say as well in terms of it.
Yes. It's surprising because I think I was surprised at the regions that buy into that message, because naively I had assumed, you take the US market for example, I'd assumed that the US was, you know, they're all gas guzzlers with massive great V8 engines and they're not interested in the environment. But it was one of the first regions where they wanted us to put the made using 100% renewable energy logo on the pack, because there's a huge environmental lobby in the US, as well as, you know, people that, you know, love fossil fuels and all the other things.
And what advice would you give to others who might want to achieve something similar to what you've managed to achieve at Wyke?
In terms of the renewable side, I would always say what I say to everyone. You know, quite often people say to me, "Oh, we can't afford to be greener because you know, it costs more." It's a myth. You know, it really is a myth. If you can get into, you know, self-production of, you know, energy, cutting packaging, you know, there's very little that you would do to improve the environment that won't save the business money. How can it be wrong to view water as a finite resource? You know, if you view water as a finite resource and try and save it, it's going to save you money, because if you run a food plant, the more water you use, the more effluent you produce, the more water you have to heat, the more chemicals you can use. Everything, as long as we treat all of the environmental assets as if they're a finite resource, it will help to lower costs within the business, and I absolutely believe that. And that's what I'd say to people. You know, have a look at it, view it, and dip your toe into it. You know, one of my friends who's a dairy farmer, a lovely guy, he came to see me because he was looking at putting solar panels on the roof of his dairy because when the milk comes off the cows, it's obviously warm and it has to be cooled really quickly from body temperature to down to less than 5 degrees. So they need these ice banks that produce a lot of ice water to cool the milk really quickly. The great thing about solar is on a dairy farm is that when the sun's out and it's really hot, that's exactly when those ice banks need all the energy. In the winter, when it's 1 or 2 degrees or -3 or whatever, you know, they're hardly using any energy. So they use these solar panels to chill these ice banks down all day, and it's a way of storing all that energy, which is then used when they come in to milk the cows. So this friend of mine had a look at the system, and then he put solar panels on his roof. And then when I saw him, you know, a couple of months later, he'd done a load of other environmental initiatives, and, you know, he's since turned the farm organic. And so it can, if people start, it can really, they really can get the bug for it and see the benefits to the whole business and the benefits to the people that work within the business as well. Because everyone, you know, it's something that really engages your team, customers, and everything else.
So Richard, just got quite a few questions in, as you would think we would. Where should we go with this? So just thinking about, we're obviously talking about green energy. So what is your next step or idea to continue with your green and sustainable farming?
I think the key thing is what we can do on the farm, how we can farming, particularly dairy farming, has issues with regards to greenhouse gases, in as much as cows produce methane. It's about doing everything we can to lower the carbon footprints of the farms that produce the milk, and that's the real challenge for us, to get the farmers engaged in the journey and try and reduce the carbon footprint of the farms in the region that are producing the milk, and also to try and make them more economically sustainable at the same time by hopefully getting support from customers to help us through that journey.
And talking about farmers and your supply chain, so you obviously carry the red tractor logo, which obviously a pledge to use suppliers within a 35-mile radius. How does that work, and I guess what pressures does that put on the business for doing the right thing?
Well, the red tractor logo is a farm assurance scheme for UK and British milk. So all farm assured British milk in the UK carries the red tractor logo. So it actually is one of the things that sets us apart from countries all around the world. So when buyers buy milk powder in China, for example, they're reassured by the fact that UK milk all comes under the red tractor farm assurance scheme, which actually helps to give customers the confidence to buy in some of those regions. And some of those regions, that assurance that the UK can give that products are produced in the right way, it is a really important thing, because they've had if you take China, for example, they've had problems with melamine in powder and things like that. So to buy from the UK with the red tractor assurance is a very strong selling tool in those emerging markets.
Got another question here on use of technology. Obviously there must be a lot of technology in your business. So what role does technology play in the development of your business? I'm guessing in the 150 years since you've been trading as Wyke, it must have changed hugely.
Yeah, the technology is changing really quickly, and in cheese making and farming, it's changed really quickly, and it's added some really positive benefits. If you take the digestate, as we call it, which is the spent material that comes off the AD plant, so it's like it's a clear liquid without any odour, but it's actually quite high in natural nitrogen, phosphates and potash, so it's a really good organic fertiliser. And years ago, a farmer would have gone out with a slurry spreader and just spread lines up and down a field. Whereas now, with these new precision farming tools that they have, each of the tractors has GPS. If you're a farmer, you can say to them, I'd like, 50 kilos of nitrogen per hectare or whatever, and you will get that, So that's one of the ways that technology has is able to improve the environment. So the spent material that we get off the AD plant is actually quite a valuable feed for the farmland, and is able to replace the use of artificial fertilizers. So that's just one example of technology helping. But on the renewable side, the technology is being developed, and you know, things like carbon capture and you know, hydrogen production from solar and things like that. That it's moving so fast that none of us really know where it's going to end up. But the environmental benefits are going to be massively improved by the development of great new technologies.
And another question here, it says, so Wyke has had some amazing success winning awards for your products and recognition for your green investment. What are you most proud of?
I think the thing that I'm most proud of is the team that we've built, especially during the COVID crisis. I think when you come under any pressure, I think you really realise who you can rely on around you. And I've been immensely proud of the team at Wyke and at Bruton, and you know, a lot of them we've worked with for years. Something like 30% of my colleagues we've worked with for over 10 years. So one thing we try and do is collect people and try and make them part of the family. So I was immensely proud of them, especially when, you know, huge parts of the country were locked down and staying at home, and you know, they were turning up and making cheese, and you know, and committed and you know, putting overtime in because we were busy and that sort of thing. So you know, I'm hugely indebted to the colleagues that I work with. So that's the thing I'm most proud of. I'm really proud also of my grand's vintage cheddar. So our vintage cheddar that we sell all around the world is called Ivy's Vintage, and it's named after my gran because she wrote the recipe down, and she was a bit of a food technologist of her time, but she never left Somerset, let alone travelled on a plane, and she would be amazed to see that her cheese has been sold in 160 countries around the world, loads of which she'd never have heard of, let alone imagined that her cheese would ever end up being sold to. So I'm really proud of that as well.
Yeah, I had a question on that. So did different countries like different types of cheddar?
Yeah, they do really. I think that I think sometimes it's about articulating a point of difference. So in the case of the US, they really like you know, a really strong, complex vintage cheddar, you know, 18 months to 2 years old, those sort of crunchy bits. So they love the Ivy's Vintage. If you go to other regions, they use it for different things. We've developed some special recipes for regions in France, recipes that cream for they have a recipe called Le Welsh in France, which is a bit like Welsh rarebit, but with a French twist on it. i.e. it has 18 times as much garlic in it as it would if we made it in the UK. And so we make a cheese specifically for that, for customers, that creams down really nicely, and because they sort of whisk it as they're cooking it, they put some beer with it and some garlic and stuff like that. So yeah, it's different, and I think that's one of the things about export. It's important to be versatile about what people want and what the usage occasions are. But I guess wherever we go, they really like the really strong cheeses more often than not, and that's what they're looking for, and that's the point of difference.
Excellent. And I've got another question here. You did just touch on the US, but just asking whether you're concerned about the effect of a US trade deal on the UK food market.
Well, I'm never concerned about a trade deal as long as it's the right type of trade deal, and I think that you know, as a dairy farmer and also friends who are, you know, farmers as well, there's a very real risk to UK farming of poor trade deals with any of the big economies. So if you take the US, for example, the structure of their farming is hugely different to the UK. You know, the UK is relatively extensive. They're family farms. They're really quite green. and they're part of the community. The US model is they're big farm units, they're massive businesses, they have a different approach to the environment and the way that they are part of the social community. So the wrong type of trade deal with the US is almost like introducing the grey squirrel in with the red squirrels. You know, could be a very, you know, it could be a very damaging thing for UK farming. So no, and that's why no trade deal is simple. But I would always ask the government to make sure that we don't sell farming down the river just to get the right trade deal for, you know, finance or professional services. You know, probably shouldn't say that to you guys, should I? But professional services, because you guys are probably thinking the opposite. We'll have the professional services, and no, but and as the farming community has to be really aware and active in the debate, because consumers, it's bizarre that consumers in the US love the way that we farm in the UK and what we do, and they really buy into it because their farms are quite different. You're not saying that they're bad, they're what they are, and but what we wouldn't necessarily want to do is introduce those standards and that structural difference, because it could be a real it could have a massive impact on the rural economy in the UK. So those are those things that they need to be treated really, really carefully. Donald Trump will want his own way in trade deal. He would expect everyone else to, and that's why Europe has found it so difficult to get a trade deal with the US, because they differ in their approach to, you know, GM and a whole load of things that, you know, UK consumers might not be ready for quite yet.
Conscious of time, I've got loads of questions, but I'm gonna finish with one question. So we've talked about COVID, we talked about Brexit. So the other C word, Christmas. You got any predictions for what we're going to be eating cheese-wise at Christmas?
Well, hopefully we'll be eating lots of vintage cheddar this Christmas, hopefully, and hopefully we can put COVID behind us, and hopefully we'll get together with our families and friends, because it's been a tough period for people, and particularly I think young people as well, who want to get out and see their friends, and so yeah, hopefully we'll see a Christmas where things return to some sort of normality and people can spend time with their friends and family.
Let's hope so. So I'm gonna just say a huge thank you to Rich. I would hand back over to Ria, but I think her internet actually might still be down. So thanks, Ria. Yeah, we've been running these webinars for a while, and please watch this space, because I'm sure we're going to have plenty more exciting speakers. We've also got our knowledge hub, our food and drink knowledge hub, and also our business after COVID and transition. And obviously, if you've got other members of your teams or contacts who you feel would like to be on our mailing list for our webinar series, then please do contact us directly. Ria, actually, she's just come back. So Ria, would you just like to say a few final words?
Yeah, apologies for that. I knew that was going to happen at some point because the internet has been in and out all day. So eventually managed to jump back on. I just want to say thank you very much to Rich. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for inviting us. I really enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And thank you everyone else who's joined us on the line today as well.